This is Rocky Snyder. At the tone, leave your name and message and I'll get back to you.
Hey Dad, it's Maddie. I had an idea for your next show. How about you have a badass surfer girl that totally rips? Okay, I love you. I gotta go.
In this episode, I welcome Candice Appleby, who, according to ESPN, is Abby Wambach, Serena Williams, Brittany Griner, and Danica Patrick all rolled into one. She's talented, fiercely competitive, tremendously well-respected, and a true ambassador of the sport of stand-up paddling. Oh, and she's also not afraid to leave the guys in her wake. Welcome to the RockFit Files. I'm Rocky Snyder, and with me on location is Candice Appleby. Candice, thanks for agreeing to be on the show here this week. Good to see you.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Rocky.
Now, you're in Southern California, San Clemente area?
Yes, San Clemente.
Okay, so generally what I like to do is kind of kick off a whole bunch of rapid fire questions to kind of get to know you a little bit, and for any of our viewers, just to kind of like 1 minute, we'll throw it on Instagram, a whole bunch of things, get to know Candice in a minute or less. So
right.
Are you ready for a little rapid fire question series?
Give me what you got.
Okay, here we go. Regular or goofy foot?
Regular.
Okay. Soul surfer or contest surfer?
Soul.
Favorite surf break?
Makaha. And Sano.
Sano, no, Frank, and Makaha. Okay, they're paired up. I like that. One on the island, one on the mainland.
Hard to choose.
And what is your worst pet peeve in terms of surf etiquette?
Ooh. People that vibe.
Oh, just aggro folks out of the water.
Yeah, the ones that think they're so cool and they're not having fun.
Non-stokers.
Yeah.
The wannabe pros is really what you're saying. Okay, cool. And the break that saw your worst wipeout?
Oh man. It's Punta Rocas in Peru. The inside shore break. They call it the bell or something. I got my
that's
bell
what you
rung.
rung? You get in there and you ring your bell?
Yes,
Gotcha.
I got pounded this last year at the Pan American Games. Cost me a gold medal.
Well, we'll talk about that for sure. And then what's your number one food for fuel?
Ooh, number one food for fuel. I'd say avocado or ahi.
Oh, man, a woman after my own stomach. All right, well, there you have it. Okay, so Candice, you know, the word wahine is usually used in the surf culture to describe a female surfer, but I feel like there should be another Hawaiian word on top of that translates from the word super to Hawaiian, because you're like a super wahine. You are the epitome of a water person, which in the days of Duke Kahanamoku, we're talking not only did you surf, but swim and paddle and life-saving and spearfishing and anything you can think of. Have you been deep sea diving in a bathysphere by chance?
I have not. I have not been deep sea diving.
Okay, so almost, I think 99.9% complete water person. It's just that 0.1%. We've got to get you in a bathysphere. So if you come up here, we'll see about Mbari and see if you're getting you into the Research Institute. But meanwhile, you're a contest surfer. You are a long distance paddler, stand up as well as prone. You've done the Molokai to Oahu, the Molokai crossing how many times now?
5 times.
5 times, and 2 of those times were stand up. And then you said, oh, that's way too easy, a paddle, and I'm standing up all the time. Let's see if I can just use my arms without a paddle. So you go prone. And how many miles is it from Molokai to Oahu?
32.
You know, you ask any endurance, long distance athlete the distance of a race, and they will tell you exactly the distance. Not like it's about 30. No, it's 30.
Well, it's a little more than 32. It depends on the line you take, right?
Yeah, it depends on the captain in your escort boat for sure. Yep. Yes, I understand. Now I've done some distance paddling myself, but not to the effect. I would actually love to do the Molokai crossing somewhere in my future. I find myself like I am the rebirth of Jack LaLanne. That's how I think in my head. So at age like 70, he was towing guys across the bay for his birthday, chained up and going across San Francisco Bay with people in rowboats. I don't think I'm going to do that. But like when I turn 60 or something, I think Molokai is calling my name.
All
We
right.
did have you ever done the Monterey Bay crossing? Have you ever
I
come
have
up
not.
to Santa Cruz?
No.
All right. Well, we're going to get you up here and do that because it's just shy of 32. It's more like, as far as I'm concerned, it's 29 miles, even though officially they're saying it's 28. But you got to start in the harbor. And when you finish, you add it all together. And GPS doesn't lie as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
29 miles. It really separates people, doesn't it? Do you notice, like, you've got a whole bunch of other races that you do, I'm sure, that are in like the 10K range, 6 to 12 miles. You've done those before, right?
A lot of them, yeah.
And you get everyone and their grandmother and grandson out there with you. And they're like, oh, yeah, I can do that. And they're pretty good shape. But as soon as you go past, say, the 25-mile mark into, like, I think the definition of insanity, as soon as you get into the insane distances, you really have a different crew, don't you?
Yeah, you have to have a little bit of that kind of masochist button, the let the pain in button, for sure. It's definitely, especially something like Molokai, that you have the race itself, you have all the training, you have all the lead up, but just the logistics before you get on the water that morning, it's crazy. You fly there, you paddle back. So the morning before the race, you're looking for your escort boat in a sea of 150 escort boats. And you got to paddle all your gear out to your boat before the race starts at 7 in the morning. You got to get through the shore break on a tippy, narrow board with all your stuff, keep it dry, and so just half the battle is getting to the start line in general.
Wow, you're making the Monterey Bay crossing sound like riding a Cadillac. And here I thought, well, Alaskan current, chilled waters, crossing over a deep underwater canyon and shark-infested waters. That sounds pretty adventurous, but now you're just stepping it up another notch. In fact, I didn't even bring in like Channel Island currents. What's just racing you across. And if you don't, I'm sure, orient yourself in just the right way, you're going to be off miles just because the current's going to be sucking you in the wrong direction. What's the most challenging thing when you're talking about, whether it's your stand-up is awesome. I got to admit, I don't know how you fare with prone paddling, but either way, when you're doing the long distance paddling, what is the thing that is the most challenging for you? Do you think it's the mental game or is the physical aspect?
It's a combination of both. I think when you sign up for something like that, you know that you have to you're physically going to put yourself in a position of discomfort, right? So no matter how trained you are, it's going to hurt. So you're signing up for yourself for, several hours in the pain cave. But mentally, yeah, I mean, you have to have a strong mind to get through a race like that, because you can be the most prepared athlete, a top level elite athlete, or you can be somebody who has put in all the time, put in all the work, and it's maybe a bucket list type adventure race for you, right? There's lots of different people who have taken on the Molokai in that way, but it takes a lot mentally to push yourself past that point of like, can I do this? Can I finish this? Oh, the tide and the wind and the swell are not in my favor this year. I thought it was going to be a fast year. It's a slow year. There has to be something in you that, pushes you through that mental barrier. Having a strong mental game is really the game changer.
Yeah, because that escort boat sometimes looks really cozy, right? And there's two voices sometimes in the head, at least in my head, and they're almost like the devil and the angel sitting on your shoulder, and they're both talking to you and who you're going to listen to. Just go for another stroke. Just count 10 more strokes and see where you are after that. Count 50 more strokes. And then meanwhile, the other one's going, you've already done this once. You don't have anything really to prove. It's okay. I mean, just go ahead and relax. Fortunately, that's never the voice that's won out on me, but it's that constant mental obstacle course. I'm sure. Do you find the same thing? A couple voices in your head?
Yeah, I've never had that quit voice for me.
Okay,
I'm
maybe
not
that's
a
my
quitter,
mental institution kind of coming through right now, and I actually have some bipolar or multiple personality coming in.
But I mean, sometimes it's the how hard do I want to push, right? And that's a race. Molokai is really one of the only races I've ever taken on where I take that race with a lot of respect. And I've done really well in my racing career, both in stand-up and in prone. But I've never had a year going into Molokai where I said, this is my year and I'm going in to win, because I haven't had a year where I've been able to have that dedicated preparation for what it takes to win that race. I've gone into that race wanting to place. I've gotten third both times I did it solo and both times I did it prone. But I haven't had a year yet where I said, this year I'm going into Molokai to win Molokai. And that's the only race that I've ever really taken that mentality, because I know it takes a lot of learning, a lot of preparation. And every year that I've done it has been to gather information, to enjoy the process, to be competitive. But I've been realistic with my expectations of myself. Now, pretty much every other race I enter, it's like, I'm going to be the one at the pointy end of the finish.
Okay, well, tell me about your most glorious victory then. What was the one that you came in and just rocked it?
Some of my favorite wins have been years where I've come back from injury or some sort of maybe an emotional barrier or a rough season of life. So, for example, we have a race called the Battle of the Paddle, and it's now changed to the Pacific Paddle Games. We actually haven't had it for a year, but it's the biggest race in our sport. So anybody in stand-up knows the Battle of the Paddle, or what's called the PPG, and it was put on by Rainbow Sandals and Jerry Lopez, and then it became the PPG, the Pacific Paddle Games. And that race is a race that I've won 6 times when it was the BOP and 3 times when it was the PPG. And that's our Super Bowl of SUP. And it most of the time takes place at Doheny, and then there was a year where it happened at Salt Creek. I won it a few years in a row, and then I got second. I was going for my 5th victory, and I got second. And the following year, I had a hand injury that I had to deal with, and I took the year off. And so by 2014, it was the comeback year. And, there was a lot of emotions, a lot of things tied to the injury that I had. So coming back, and then I won that next year in 2014 at Salt Creek, and the waves were pumping. It was, 6 feet overhead, paddling on a 12.5-foot race board with a 1.5-inch rocker at a beach break. So that was a really exciting victory that I had.
So did you have good timing on entry and exit there? I mean, because that can make or break, of course, but what was that like getting out with 6 feet overhead, beach break?
Well, for our start of our race, the horn went and a set came. So, there's not much you can do at Creek, but I've done quite a bit of racing on my stand-up. I've done some lifeguard racing. I have straps on my boards. So I have that front left lifeguard handle strap that I can punch through waves with pretty good. And I have been surfing my whole life. So my surfing ability on longboards and shortboards has really helped me to do well in surf racing. There's a lot of women who have gotten really good at surfing their race boards, and the level has continued to increase over the last several years. But I could say I was comfortable early. There's something about being comfortable in the ocean. You can get your skill up to a certain level and your proficiency riding the waves on this difficult equipment, but having the ability to stay calm and not panic saves a lot of energy. So in races like the BOP and the PPG, especially at a place like Salt Creek, I had in the very start of the race, you get tossed around, you get hit. I think I was maybe in 5th or 6th getting to the first turn buoy. But I know my wave riding ability. So throughout the course of several laps, I ended up on top because I was able to make the fewest mistakes, ride the waves the longest, and get back through the waves without panicking. And I was able to save my energy. So that, I think, is what has helped me in all my surf racing.
Well, with stand-up paddling, it has exploded across the world, really. But just speaking domestically here, no longer does anybody need waves to catch. As long as you have a body of water, people are stand-up paddling anywhere, including, outdoor swimming pools and doing yoga classes. But so my question there is, with the explosion of interest in stand-up paddles, as paddling, you must have also a certain explosion onto the scene of paddle races. And a drawback that I see, or an issue that could easily develop, is you've got people that are coming from landlocked areas thinking that, oh, I've been doing races on riverways and lakes and lagoons or whatever, and now they're coming out to the Pacific Ocean. It's quite a wake-up call. Do you see that, or is it just my imagination? It's just kind of what I'm thinking that might be happening.
Yeah, that's definitely happened throughout the course of our sport. Now we have races that are everywhere, right? We have, like you said, we have flat water races. We've got races in Lake Tahoe. Any body of water you can race. You can do sup yoga. You can just cruise around, look at the fish. But as far as racing in the ocean, in the waves, it definitely challenges your ability. And traditionally, the people that come from a surfing background have excelled. Now, stand-up has really, when you get to the highest level of racing, the athletes have pushed themselves to become proficient in a variety of conditions. So we have athletes that have come from surfing, or that have come from outrigger paddling, from surf ski paddling. Then you have athletes that come from something totally different, like, I don't know, skiing, or from basketball, right?
Yes.
There's people that come from all sorts of different facets of sport. And so it's been really neat to see over the course of the last several years, different athletes really push themselves to become proficient in the waves. And I'm talking at the professional level. And so many athletes have improved because the big one of the year is the BOP, or the Pacific Paddle Games, the PPG, right? So you can do well in the flat water racing and the straight line racing and the course racing that's not in the ocean. But at the end of the year, everybody wants to see how good they can do in this final grand finale, Super Bowl of SUP type race, right?
Oh,
And so it's forced everyone to kind of raise the level of their skill, and it's really a spectacle to watch. But it's also not necessarily the most common type of racing anymore. It's the most exciting, in my opinion, surf racing, and that's what the ISA has taken to several world championships. We were in the Pan American Games this year, and it was a surf race. If we get into the Olympics, it'll potentially be a surf type course race, because it's really exciting and the roots of our sport are surfing. But there is a huge participation in flat water racing and course racing, and even now the 200-meter sprint in a straight line is becoming really popular. And so just like running, just like any sort of other endurance sport, you have a huge range of the ways that you can participate and compete.
Well, I think we're going to see that to some degree filter into surfing in general, with the amount of indoor, or I say inland, not indoor, but inland wave factories, wave pools popping up in Texas and down outside Fresno with Kelly's Place, or there's a whole bunch, Orlando. There's places now that we're going to see, I think, in 10 years at the latest, maybe, we're going to see some Groms coming on the scene and going on the pro circuit, who have actually been just practicing on their skate park, basically, on their wave pool. I don't know. It'll be interesting. Like the first person to make it on the WSL or whatever top pro there is, if they're actually been training at the wave pools more than the ocean. Well, it's neither here nor there. It's just kind of something to speculate on. Tell me about the Pan Am Games. How was that?
That was amazing. It was such an honor to be a part of that. I've been to multiple ISA, surfing world championships for stand-up. And it's always an honor to represent your country. And it's so different because you're going there, you have your individual goal, but you have your whole country backing you. And the Pan Ams was so incredible because we were all together. We're the surf team. So our shortboarders were with us, our longboarders were with us. And then you had sup surfers and racers. I did sup surfing and racing, which was a lot because they're two totally different sports. It'd be like doing swimming and doing the high dive. Like, you're in a pool and you're wearing a bathing suit, but it's really two totally different things. So it was so incredible. We got to do the opening ceremonies, and you're in your bright blue Nike gear with 600 other athletes from all the different sports marching into a huge arena, and you're getting on the buses together. And we were with the men's 3-on-3 basketball team, the shooting team, women's tennis, just on our bus, and we'd all ask each other, hey, what sport are you? What sport are you? And we're like, oh, we're the surf team. And people are like, what? Surf team? That's so cool, And it was such an honor to carry the flag and just get that Olympic experience, it was just really incredible.
That's fantastic. Now I can imagine, of course, U.S. Combined with Hawaiians would be a dominating force, but then you've also got the Brazilians, you've got the Australians. Were there any sleeper, like countries you wouldn't consider having epic surfers come from there, or somebody that surprised you? Anything pop out in your memory about that?
So for the Pan American Games, it's all countries for the Americas, right? So you have United States, you have Canada, and then you have all the Central and South American countries, which there's a lot of different people, right? There's lots of countries. The Peruvians did really well. There was a lot of really incredible Peruvian surfers, and the Canadians too. The Canadians really surprised me. Now, there were quite a few Canadians that live in the States, but maybe their parent has, they're Canadian with their passport and their nationality, so they're able to compete for Canada. So, I mean, yeah, there was, and Argentina had some really great surfers as well. So.
Very cool. Every time we go down to Baja on a little surf trip, it never fails that there's a group of Canadians passing through. So I don't think they really stay much in Canada for the year. They actually they go to Canada's south, which is known as Baja. And of course, a jab into the Australians. That's right. You couldn't make it into the Pan Am Games. That's right. So the thing I asked you at the beginning of the hour was that massive wipeout you had. I think you said it was Peru at this inside break called Bells.
So they the wave is called Punta Rocas. So we did a technical stand-up paddle race through the outside of the main surf break, but then you have to come in around through, and you finish through the shore break. Now the shore break there is so big that we didn't start the race on the beach. We started the race around the corner, around the point, and then we do our final lap. We have to go through the shore break, and they call the shore break the Bell. And it's a shore break that it's not just one wave right on the shore. It's like shore break that stacks up for 100 yards, and it's 6 to 10 waves deep. So you kind of, when you're going in, you just kind of have to go, right? And it was one of those places where I only went there with one race board, so I didn't practice much in the shore break prior because you break your board, right? Our boards are really fragile. And I came in, I was doing really, really well. I was probably about 40 seconds ahead, which is, I was leading the race. I was doing great. I was ready to take the gold, and I was coming in, and there was a wave, and it kind of looked like a nice little wave, and then it just cyclopsed, jacked up, and dropped out from under me, and it was like this probably 8 to 10 foot face when it jacked up, and I had to kick my race board out straight. Otherwise, if I would have gone straight down, I could have really hurt myself. But then where I got wiped out was really close to a rip. So I got pounded by that wave, and then I got sucked backwards into the rip. And it was one of those kind of rips, like not just a normal rip. It was like the kind people die in, So I lost my paddle. I'm trying to get my stuff. And I eventually got in, and I still got the silver medal, which was great. But had I been a little bit more south down the beach, or maybe north, I'm trying to think of the direction. No, south down the beach. If I got pounded by that wave, it would have pushed me in at least, and I still would have been able to probably win gold. But my lineup wasn't so good. I was coming in on that wave too close to the rip, and I got pounded, and it was a bummer because I worked really hard. I was prepared. I was favored to win the race, but I crossed the finish line, and Brazil was ahead of me, and Lena, she's a great athlete. She's been working so hard, and it really filled me with joy to see her and her camp just going nuts, because I know what it feels like to win and to feel that. And so the honest feeling in my heart was good for her, so it was an accomplishment. Even getting a silver medal was a real proper Olympic style silver medal with the rings on it. It was heavy, you know, and it was a pretty cool experience. So
That sounds like definitely a lifetime experience and something you'll probably remember for many years to come. But
sure.
you've been surfing all your life. You grew up in Southern California. You told me you moved over to Hawaii for a while, went to school over there, but then you came back to Southern California, which
Yeah.
I know there's several people that do that. What drew you back to Southern California? Was it the waves? Was it the people? Did you just
It
have?
was a combination of things. I was, you know, my time had just kind of come in Hawaii, and to be, you know, totally honest, I was in a relationship there that wasn't healthy. That was I mentioned, a hand injury. That was the source of that injury that I ended up dealing with a few years later. I was with somebody who didn't treat me with very much respect, and so part of the reason that I left was because of that. But another big part of the reason was my sister was having kids, and I wanted to be around, you know, I wanted to be around for them growing up, and I didn't want to miss out on that because my sister and I are super close. And so it was a combination of multiple things, and it was great for my career as well as an athlete, because once I moved back to California, I was able to have more resources and have more of a community to train with, and traveling became a lot easier. So traveling from California became a lot easier.
I bet. And of course, over the span of the years, you've been in the professional realm. You've had sponsors. You've got, well, for many years, you were sponsored by Surf Tech, which is Santa Cruz-based business, and Randy French and Duke Brower. You know, we're mutual friends here.
Yeah.
In fact, Randy, I hope to get him on in a week or two and talk about all his years of shaping and the history of surfing with him, which would be cool. But how was it surfing for Surf Tech?
It was so cool. I mean, Surf Tech it's like a candy store for surfers, right? You have all the best shapers in the world, and you get to pick like anything. For me, I love surfing on any type of surfboard and learning how to ride a wave the way that board's calling for it to be ridden. So it was a dream come true to, you know, be sponsored by Surf Tech. And I got signature models with Randy, which was so cool. He made my first signature stand-up paddleboard shapes, and it was a blessing. Duke really believed in me from the beginning, and he brought me on, and I learned a lot about myself, about marketing and branding and different equipment. And then eventually they paired me up with Joe Bark, and who's a, you know, world-renowned traditional paddleboard shaper and stand-up paddleboard raceboard shaper. And I went on to have several signature racing models with Joe, both adult boards and children's boards. And I mean, it was such a dream come true. It's something that I still look at that it amazes me. You know, I see a board on the roof of somebody's car and it has my name on it, and I'm like, whoa, like, it's not something that I will ever be too cool to be stoked about, because it's just,
Isn't that awesome?
yeah, it's
That
amazing.
is so cool.
Yeah.
Several years back, when you were in preschool, I think I wrote this book on how to get in shape for surfing, and I just got an email from somebody over in the UK, and they said, while we're on lockdown, you know, we surf, but we got your book, and we've been doing it. And they shared their 5-week program and what they're doing, and they're all excited, and that got me just totally amped. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's in England. That's kind of cool. It's like,
Yeah.
see your signature board on somebody's car. You're like, hey, yeah, that's
Totally.
what a beautiful sense of accomplishment for you. Now you've got those signature lines, but you also you're a surfer through and through. So aside from stand-up paddling and racing, oh, are we there?
There you are. You're back. I hear you.
Okay, cool.
No,
So,
again.
what I was saying is, aside from the racing that you're doing, you're obviously an accomplished surfer too. So you competed. In fact, there was another mutual friend that wanted to say hi that we were talking a few weeks ago, and that's the owner of Indoboard, Hunter Jocelyn.
Oh,
So
yeah.
Hunter was an announcer during this contest that you were in, and you blew away. When I say all the competitors, I don't mean all the female competitors. You blew away all the guys as well. So, and this is what I love about surfing is that there's really no gender barriers. You bust down the door like there's no tomorrow. So, can you just share that awesome experience of just coming in and dominating?
Sure. That was in 2008. That was at the Duke's Ocean Festival. So at the time I was living in Waikiki. I lived in Waikiki for about 8 years, and I was mentored in Waikiki and in Makaha by some of the best watermen and waterwomen in the world. It's where I learned stand-up paddling. And so the Duke's Ocean Fest 2018, they had a stand-up paddle surfing division. And at the time, so they had a open pro division, which was all men and me. They had a women's division. They had an amateur division, and then they had a kids division. And at the time, Kai Lenny was in the kids division, which was
okay,
pretty cool. So I have a picture of him and I at that event. He ended up winning the kids division. And it's, the Duke's Ocean Festival is a week-long celebration of Duke Kahanamoku. There is an open water swim. There's the surfboard water polo. There's tandem surfing, legend surfing, and stand-up paddle surfing. And I did the open pro division and the women's division, and I went on to win the open pro division and the women's division. And it was pretty incredible. I remember the earlier days in the weeks we had the preliminary rounds, and I kept advancing in the open pro division. And I remember in the semifinal, I was at the shower. I was showering off, and you can hear the announcers. And I was amazed to be in the semi. I think I was in the semi with Dwayne DeSoto, Kamo Owai, and Noah Shimabukuro, right? Like 3 of the world's best longboarders, guys I look up to, who are incredible. And they were saying the results, and they say it backwards. 4th place, 3rd place, 2nd place. And I think I got 2nd place. And I remember when they said 3rd place and it wasn't me, which meant, oh my goodness, I got either 2nd or 1st. I'm advancing. I actually cried in the shower a little bit. I didn't get all dramatic and crazy girly, but I was like, what? And that was so exciting. And then the final wasn't going to be for a few more days. And so I remember that summer I was really training really hard. I had a trainer. It was the first time, I believe I was 22. It was the first time I was really looking at everything I did and in the scope of training, right? Before, I've just always been an athlete. I've always just exercised, and I never really called it training, but that year was the first year I really took things to a professional level for myself. And I was doing a lot of visualization. And I remember leaving my house. I lived a block from Queens, right down the street from the surf break. And I remember leaving my house telling myself, okay, this is the last time you leave your house. And when you come back, you're going to be the champion. And I told myself that in my mind. And I remember training throughout the week, running on the Alawai Canal, visualizing myself winning and visualizing myself surfing the waves. And so I went out and I had back-to-back heats. There were 30-minute heats, which is a long heat. And I surfed against the men first. And it was Brian Keaulana, who is one of the world's most incredible, well-respected watermen in the world. And Nolan Martin, who is also his nephew. He's a Keaulana as well, who's an incredible surfer, lifeguard, waterman. And Noah Shimabukuro, who is an incredible longboarder. And it was us 4 in the final, and I got some really good waves, and the judges liked the way that I was really utilizing the paddle to do my turns. And I remember the photographer who was out in the water, I caught this one wave and I did it off the lip, and he said something like, "You're buying drinks tonight," or something like that. He was, I was in a rhythm, and it was going really good. And then they didn't say who the winner was, and we were out in the water. We didn't know till later. And then I had to stay out in the water, and I had the women's heat. The women's heat had 6 people, and the waves had gotten so much smaller. And honestly, just getting waves in the women's heat was so much harder, because they were pissed at me. They were sitting on me. It was really difficult, but I ended up I think I only got 2 waves in the women's final. And then we were up on stage, they were announcing, and 4th place, 3rd place, 2nd place. And when it wasn't me at 2nd place, I was like, oh my goodness. And I won, and then they announced the women's, and I won that too. And it was just an incredible day that I will always remember. It was like, wow, like.
Oh, that is such a great story. Oh my gosh. That's definitely something that you will hold on to forever. You mentioned training and you mentioned exercise, and I'm glad you separate the two because they are quite different. Exercise is moving the body with some thought in mind, but training is much more focused, and everything you put into your training program has an element that's going to try and get you closer and closer to your ultimate successful achievement or your goal, right? So what was you've already mentioned visualization, but when it came and working with a trainer, what are some other elements that you put into your training protocol?
Well, having a plan is really important, right? And in the early years of stand-up, I never really had a plan as far as my plan on the water with my water time. I was blessed to get in early and have a good natural ability, and I would put a lot of time in on the water. But as far as learning proper intervals and all that, it took me a few years to develop a proper plan for my actual paddle race training. But really, there's no substitute for time on the water or whatever your craft is, right? Time in the gym or time just really perfecting your craft, but also nutrition and cross training. And for me, cross training has been a big element. Every 2 years or so, I change something within my cross training, whether it's, just changing the way that I warm up or adding a new fun sport to what I'm doing. Because learning a new sport, adding something different reminds me of my athletic ability, my natural giftedness. And so I push myself to learn something new and excel at it and add that to my game plan for just to have fun, right? But also remind myself of the way God made me, and he gifted me with athletic abilities. So that adding a new fun, different twist to my cross training really strengthens my mental game. I do that every couple years. And then of course, nutrition, right? So nutrition is really important. When I teach clinics and I talk to people about race preparation, and I tell them that your body's like a race car. And if you put bad fuel into your race car, it's going to run poorly, right? So that's also a huge element. One of the elements that I could say that I've lacked, and this is a hindsight is 2020 type of thing, is really the recovery aspect. I've put a lot of miles in, a lot of waves, a lot of shore poundings, a lot of activity on my body that I didn't always take the time to, do the active or static stretching afterwards, or getting massages or foam rolling, all of that body care. And I'm 34 now, and I'm at that age where you really start to feel everything. I really feel all of it. So my, I guess advice to anybody watching or any other athletes, young athletes, is that recovery is 50% of training. And
really, I'm glad you bring that up, because that is an element in just, I think it's kind of inherent within our culture, to be honest, that even as simple as the weekend gardener will go out to their backyard and garden for hours and hours and hours. And then come Monday morning, they're wondering why their back is in pain, or why their knees are hurting them, or their neck, or so on. Yep. And then for those that come into my studio, I ask, well, that was quite the workout, or quite the sport that you did over the weekend gardening. I mean, it wasn't full contact like football, but still, it really involved your whole body. What did you do to cool down and stretch out after your gardening adventure? And they just look at me kind of like, what are you talking about, right? Yeah, so yep, totally. It's really great to hear that coming from top professionals also, is that we really have to tag in a big part of the training is can we bring our bodies back into a more balanced place from the activities that are continually drawing us out of balance. And here, of course, we're talking about stand-up racing and stand-up surfing, as well as prone paddling and surfing itself, which you would think that, oh, this is all about balance. But in some regards, you're right, but you're either regular foot or goofy, or you're more dominant with the paddle on one side of the board compared to the other, and they may be subtle, but they're still there. And the more we have these subtle imbalances, the more we drive into where we're good, and not necessarily reinforcing building up the weaker side. So we're continually, no matter what the activity, drawing us out of alignment. So there needs to be something to bring us back. So and I know that there's been a little bit of history with injury with yourself, which I'm not going to say is directly related to that, but it most likely was contributed to it. Like you had mentioned before we came on the air, that you had some sciatic issues, and
Yeah.
you've kind of now tell me a little bit about that, because what's really cool, before you answer the question, I'm going to talk one more second here, is that at the end of each episode here with the RockFit Files, I try and do a little segment that is kind of helpful, hopefully in some ways, in regards to biomechanics and movement and restoring the body or getting it stronger. And I think at the end of this episode, I'm going to put together kind of a small video segment of how most people pain. It doesn't going to work for everybody, but tell me about your experience with it.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So it was back towards the end of 2018, I was doing a lot of surf racing. And with surf racing, you end up getting in your staggered surf position. So for me, coming from a surfing background, I'm really comfortable in the staggered surfing stance. And even on my race board, I'll stand a little bit staggered. And you talk about alignment, when I stand perfectly parallel, my body actually feels twisted because I'm so used to standing in a staggered position, right? So towards the end of 2018, I started to have this, just felt like what was like almost like a hot fire poker in my right glute, right? And I thought was sciatica. And I was dealing with it. It went on for about 5 or 6 months. And I tried everything natural. I tried going to acupuncture, and I hate needles, so that was torture. And I did physical therapy. I did yoga. I did everything, and it wasn't going away. And so finally I went to the regular doctor, and I told him what was going on. I said, maybe you can x-ray my lower back. I know a lot of people have like lower back issues. It could be sciatica. They ended up x-raying my lower back, but also my hips. And what they found out was that the initial doctor said, well, it looks like you have some early arthritis on your hips. I want to send you to a hip specialist. So they sent me to the hip specialist. And what he told me was that I have a condition called femoroacetabular impingement, which is FAI for short, and a partial labrum tear on my right side. So what that is imagine my femur head being perfectly round like a normal person. Both of my femur heads aren't perfectly round. There's an edge on both of them. So as they move inside my hip socket, my entire life with running, because I love to run, and with surfing, and with hinging at my waist, every stroke I take, stand up paddling or surfing or even prone paddling, that rubbing motion eventually wears through the cartilage, causes early arthritis, and calluses on the bone. And in my situation on my right side, a partial tear of the labrum. Because of the way that I'm structured, it's not something that I can just go and have surgery for, because there's already arthritis there. They'd have to reshape the bone. There's a whole lot of things that would have to be done. So for myself, they've told me, okay, you need to limit the running and do more different types of stretching. And for me now, it's more of, okay, avoiding certain exercises that irritate it, and then really make sure I am stretching my hip flexors and getting the full range of motion and doing all the things, getting my nutrition right, not to aggravate it. Now, it's certain things aggravate it, and then certain things I'm learning my body over again, right? And so learning how to avoid that pain and not irritate it so that I can do the things that I love to do. I have been running again in the last few months, but I'm being very mindful of it, and I am trying to be smart, So, that's my injury. That's what I've been dealing with, and it's something that I just continually have to manage. The sciatic feeling eventually went away. What they said was actually happening was because of my hip immobility, my piriformis was wound up, and it was sitting on the nerve. So it wasn't a proper sciatica from the lower back, but it was pushing on the sciatic nerve and causing a lot of pain. And then it's actual physical pain from the back side of my hip socket, and I happen to feel it in the right buttocks. So, yeah, a lot.
Doesn't sound like fun any way you look at it. And
Yeah.
I do think that sciatic is kind of a sciatic pain when it's labeled that way. It covers a wide range of things going on with the hip, whether it's piriformis syndrome, sciatica, or if it's the actual structural integration of the acetabulum with the femoral head or anything like that. But I'm glad you're on the other side of it. And now, if nothing else, you've brought some awareness to your own self and have a compass, not necessarily in the form of pain, but just how the hips are feeling from time to time. You mentioned, we've got a few minutes left here, and I want to bring up the fact that you're doing coaching, and you mentioned that you put on clinics. Is that something that you're currently doing? Obviously, we are on lockdown, but just imagine that we're now out of it. Everyone's able to go back to the beach and races are occurring once again. Is that something that you're pursuing in terms of coaching and clinics and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been teaching clinics since 2012. I started an adult training club called Performance Paddling Adult Training Club back in 2015 with Anthony Vela, former business partner, great waterman and friend. And that's continuing to go. I substitute coach with him every once in a while, but I also do a lot of private coaching for stand-up paddle racing and for surfing. And I'm able to see some of my private clients right now because it's something that we're able to do at a social distance. And then I also teach surfing as well. So I'd love to share the ocean. Yesterday was actually a really, really cool day because my auntie, who's been surfing her whole life, she's 70, and she's transitioning from being able to surf a lot to not being able to surf as much. And she's learning how to paddleboard, to stand up paddleboard so she can stay on the water. And so I took her out yesterday. She did her first full lap around the Dana Point Harbor. And then the second half of my day, I was with a family that I care for, I nanny for, and I mentor their children. And I was teaching the 3-year-old Gavin how to surf. And so my day, it was a full circle day of just getting people on the water. And it felt so good to be a part of that.
Oh, a rough life, I'm sure. That must have been hard. Yeah. No, that sounds fantastic. Don't you love that you share the stoke with people? It just makes your day, whether it's little waves, big waves, or whatever the case may be. That's fantastic. So if people wanted to utilize your coaching and your background, your knowledge, experience, and so on, how can they reach out to you? How can they look up the clinics or coaching?
I have a website, CandiceAppleby.com, so they can check me out there and send me a message, send me an email. I am going to be updating with some of my different private coaching services on my website as well. And from time to time, they can follow me as well on Instagram or Facebook. On Instagram, my handle is Applesteeze with a APPLESTEEZE. So they can find me on there, and I post about the various clinics that I do. And I love teaching. I love sharing what the Lord has blessed me with in my career. I think that anything good in life, we can't really keep it unless we give it away. So it's just a way for me to pass on what I love. And I really love to see people encouraged and excelling in what they want to learn and becoming confident on the ocean, whether that's stand-up paddling, prone, surfing, whatever that is. I love to be able to be a part of someone's journey on the water. So.
Well, I've loved having you on here, and I wish we could go for another hour, but there's only so much time in the world, and there's waves to catch right now, so we got to go out there and grab some. Thanks for being on with me. I really appreciate your time, and just stay tuned for a little bit of what you can do to open up your hips, and if you're bugged by a little sciatica or hip issues, maybe this will help.
In this video, I'm going to show you 4 things that could very well take away that pain from your sciatic nerve. So if you're one of those people that suffer from sciatic pain, it could be from a whole bunch of different reasons. It doesn't necessarily mean that the problem is where the nerves are. It could be just how your body is trying to position itself against the forces of gravity, whether it's from spraining an ankle to wrenching a shoulder to even getting whiplash in a car accident. It's just the fact that the nerves that are down in the lower back and the lumbar vertebrae into the sacrum, that branch of nerves that come out and run down the backside of one hip all the way down your leg, known as the sciatic nerve, well, it could be that that's just where the pain is being felt. Well, what we're going to try and do is get your whole body to be in better alignment, to open up the space in that low back sacral area, and in so doing, maybe, just maybe, we might find some relief in that sciatic area. Now, this isn't for every single sufferer of sciatic pain, because that would be trying to treat a headache from eating ice cream too fast, the same way that you might treat a headache from hitting your head into a cabinet. The reason for the headache is going to be different, so you may have to treat it differently. But nonetheless, we'll get started. I've got a volleyball here that anything that's about this wide that has a little give to it will suffice. What we're going to have you do is lie down upon your back so that your knees are bent at about right angles and your feet are flat on the floor. Your head's going to relax on the ground, and we're going to put that ball between the knees, preferably with your arms out on the floor, whether the palms are face down if you can, or a little easier to face them up. You're going to squeeze the ball for 1 full second with both knees and then relax. Squeeze firmly and then relax. Now, if you're doing it properly, you should begin to feel the muscles toward the inner thigh and groin start to do the majority of the work. And really what we're doing is we're taking the thigh bones and pulling them in at one end while pulling them gently outward at the other end, creating space on the back side of the pelvis. Now, I might do somewhere around 10 repetitions to start with, and then over time, maybe build up to 15, 20, or even 25 repetitions at a time. And I might start with just 1 set initially, but then also, over the course of days or weeks, build up to 2 or 3 sets also. Now, once I'm done with that, we'll just move that ball away. You're going to take one ankle and cross it right over the opposite knee. And from this position, you're going to lift the legs up and hold so that the knee that is right here is directly above the hip. Now, if this is too tight for some of us, you might want to take the foot that's in the air here and place it against a chair or a wall, something to prop or support it upon. The goal here is to hold this for a little while until you start to feel the tension become reduced. For most people, that takes about 30 seconds to a minute. After which time, just bring it down, switch legs, and do the same thing on the opposite side. And what you'll most likely experience, like I am now, is that the side you choose second is often the side that's the most restricted, or the one that you feel much more muscle tension in. And it may be that this is the side you want to support a little bit more than the other, or at least hold for a bit longer until you feel that muscle relax. Most likely you're going to feel it on the back side of the leg that's crossed. And you'll notice I'm not using my hands. Often is the case that people will reach through and they'll pull to achieve a greater stretch sensation. But they're also pulling their head out of alignment, rounding their shoulders in an effort to do something else, kind of sacrificing one for the other. So that's why we want to keep the arms out, the head relaxed, and so on, and maintain that position. So once the desired time has transpired and you've felt the muscles release and relax, you'll still have the ankle crossed over the knee. But now what you'll do is pivot from the foot that's on the floor as if it's like a hinge on a door, and it's going to slowly lower the leg all the way to the ground so it can relax. The other leg, meanwhile, is going to gently press away from the body so it points up toward the ceiling. The arms are still out away from your body and relaxed on the floor, and if anything, you can turn your head in the opposite direction that the hips are rotated. After a little while, relaxing into that pose, you can rotate up and then perform the same movement on the opposite side. Now, when getting off the floor, you may want to take your time because you've been laying there for a little while doing those 3 movements. But then once you get up, walk around and just see, what does that feel like? Is there more freedom of movement? What's the sensation going down the hips and, for that matter, down your legs or wherever you might feel that sciatic referral? Then what you'll need to do is find a stairway or step at home, some object that's going to be a little bit off the floor, and another nearby, another object that you can hold on with both hands, something like this handrail. What really works well is if you're in the kitchen, use the kitchen sink or the countertop to hold on to. And if you're in your office, well, you can open up your office door and hold on to both doorknobs on either side of the door while standing on maybe on a phone book. And what we're going to be doing here is I'm going to put my front of my feet up on that elevated surface with my heels dangling off. And I'm going to maintain a nice tall posture so that my head is over my shoulders and my shoulders are over my hips. Hips are over the knees and the ankles. So if I were to take a ruler from the middle of my skull, I would hope to see that that ruler drops right down to my ankles and all the load-bearing joints of my body are in alignment with that ruler. And I'm just going to allow my body weight to sink deep into the heels and hang out here for maybe 30 seconds to a minute or two, just allowing my body to feel what it's like to stack all of the proper joints on top of each other. That means that my bones are going to now support my weight of my body and not feel compressed into the nerves or muscle tissue. In fact, when you step down off of that and walk around, you're most likely going to feel lighter, taller, yet more grounded. And most likely, we're going to feel a great reduction in that sciatic pain symptom. And it's just a symptom. It may not necessarily be where the problem lies, but if you're in a position where you're feeling it and it's not feeling good, give these 4 positions a try, these 4 exercises, if you will, and try them once. Make sure that there's no increase in pain, because that's going to tell you that maybe one of those exercises is not necessarily what you need at this moment. But if you feel better from doing these 4, then I would recommend doing them as often as you can and getting yourself out of a seated environment or a position where you're not moving the body very much, whether you're counter staff, working behind the counter of a coffee bar or whatnot, or if you're an office worker, any environment where you're stuck in one place for a long period of time is probably not what you need. You got to get out and get that body moving. But these 4 are a great place to start.